Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
It's 1,000 words fighting back, coming down to the finish. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this is one stunning picture.
1,000 words just in front. 1,000 words wins the Robert B. Lewis.
Honorary P is full out now, second on the outside, and they're coming down to the line, and 1,000 words has done it.
To another episode of Past the Wire TV. I am John Stettin, as most of you probably know, and I have the pleasure of welcoming on this show Sasscer Hill, who is an extremely interesting author and someone who writes about the sport we all love, the sport of kings. And you know, before we introduce Sasscer, who you can probably see, I will say I think our sport needs more Sasscer Hills and more people writing about it and publicizing it and showing some of the more interesting behind the scenes angles that a lot of people don't get to see. So with that said, Sasscer, thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome to Past the Wire TV.
I'm very happy to be here, and I thank you for inviting me.
No, it's my pleasure. I think what you do is fascinating. I think it's a very interesting niche, and I would like to see it become much more popular within our game. Not that it isn't, but that I you know, I think it's a great niche that you have, and I think the sport should really welcome it and become a little bit more aware of you and some of the stories that you have to tell. With that, you were kind of involved in racing in different areas before you became a novelist about thoroughbred racing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into the sport, and ultimately we'll get to how you became an author and to write about it.
Well, when I was 16, my father died, and I had always wanted a horse and a pony, and he had never wanted me to have a pony, even though we had a farm in Maryland. But there was a man named Alfred H. Smith Sr., who was the owner and breeder of Tuscaloosa 2 years in a row. He was steeplechase Eclipse Award horse, Tuscaloosa was. And this gentleman, who was very kind, and his family took me under their wing, and they raised steeplechase horses. And I was 16 and I knew how to ride, but he put me on one right off the track, and off we went fox hunting, and it was it was quite an experience. But the man taught me about everything I know, and I love the family very much. And it grieves me that, you know, he's long gone now, but it was such a wonderful introduction and education. And because we did have a farm in Maryland, when I got married, I got my first broodmare, and I spent the next 32 years breeding, raising, breaking, galloping on the farm, my own racehorses, and then handing them over to my trainer, whose name was Barry Wiseman. And we won a lot of good races at Pimlico, Laurel, Delaware Park. You know, not the big allowance races and stakes, but we did well. And we made money with my little homebreds, and it was a great thing.
What is it like for people that don't understand when you breed a horse yourself and actually raise the horse to see that horse in the winner's circle? Can you take us through that experience? Which, if you've never done it, go ahead.
I'll tell you about one of the first horses I ever bred. His name was Sea Surge. He was by a horse named Feel the Power, who was a son of Devona Dale. And I had trouble getting him out of his mother's. First time I ever foaled, and I read all the books and everything, and I knew that he was trying to come out head first and not you know, they come out toes and they dive over the pelvic girdle. So here I am, first timer, and I just stuck my hand all the way up to my shoulder in there, and I found those little feet, and I found the nose, and I pushed the nose back a little bit, and I brought the feet forward. I had no idea what I was doing. I was praying, and the little feet came out, and the nose came out behind him, and got my first foal. So that horse, I broke him. I trained him myself, galloped him on the farm. Barry Wiseman just thought he was like, wow, this is a good horse. So we went to Laurel, and he was in his first race, and I think it was a mile. And the jockey said, I think he wants to go a little shorter. And we went, okay, we'll run him 6. So we ran 6 furlongs at Pimlico, because the meet moved to Pimlico. And I just was standing there watching him, because the first time he'd run, he'd like gotten tired and he'd stopped running. And all I was doing was screaming, don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. He was on the lead, and he won. And I just, you can't imagine what that's like when you raised him and you pulled them out of the mother, and you've done everything for them, and they're your whole life, and then they win. I mean, you weep, you know. It's great. It's great. And I don't know that there could be any bigger thrill than that. I can't imagine anything bigger or better.
Yeah, you know what I was thinking as you were telling me that story, and it's a great story, and he won second time out, which is phenomenal. But had you not run him, had you not run him a mile first time out, which is very tough for anybody to do, to win it a mile first time out of the box, might have won the first race.
Might have. You know, I'm not sure. I learned so much after being in the business for so long. And I think both the father and the dam like to go long. So I guess we figured, well, maybe they'd like to go long, so we'll give it a whirl. And he was getting good times, you know, going 5 furlongs and galloping out really well. So I guess Barry thought maybe he could go a little longer. But and then he did later on. We won some races at Delaware Park, and he went longer.
Interesting. Now, did you ever ride a race?
I rode steeplechase races, and I never rode a flat race. I never had a license, so I didn't ride there.
But you actually rode steeplechase races, huh?
Yeah, and I won up at Potomac, and it wasn't actually a steeplechase race. It was what they call a timber race, over the solid board fences that are 4 feet high and they're nailed together.
That sounds like fun. Not for me.
It was crazy. I don't know what I thought I was doing, but I did, and it was just great. And I had a really good horse that Alfred H. Smith had given me to ride, and the horse would jump anything. He would jump anything, and I trusted him, and he trusted me. So we just went for it, and it was fabulous. And what I learned is that you don't rush to the jumps; they come at you. They come at you.
And you said something I want to ask you about, because I think it's an interesting part of the game, again, that a lot of people may not have their pulse on. You said he trusted you and you trusted him.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
How important is it, whether it's steeplechase or flat racing, how important is it for a horse to trust a rider and a rider to trust a horse when they're in competition?
I think it's very important. And I always wonder about, you know, you hear when they switch jockeys at the last minute and the horse wins anyway. I'm always like, well, that was lucky. I just think the more you ride a horse, the more you know if you can push him onto the rail and squeeze him through that hole. If you've never ridden him before, you might have heard that he can, but you don't know it yourself. So I find that kind of amazing. I mean, but we've got some great jockeys out there, you know, and I always like, I'm getting older now, so I always remember like Pat Day, and they used to call him Wait All Day, Pat Day.
Heart attack, Pat, wait all day, right?
Yeah, he would sit and sit and sit and sit, you know, and that's so important to know how to do those things. And we've got some great young jockeys now. It's been fun to watch. I don't watch as much as I used to, because I moved to South Carolina and I've gotten away from the Maryland tracks and Charlestown. And I mean, we went everywhere with our horses, Delaware, Charlestown, and then Colonial Downs when they were running there. I won a lot of money at Colonial Downs. because I got some Virginia breds to take down there.
And they're running again at Colonial's a revitalized meet and racetrack.
I'm very glad to hear it, because the breeders programs for a while that they had in Maryland were horrible. I mean, everybody was going broke, and because they wouldn't get slots. So the breeders bonuses were pathetic. They were nothing. And, you know, Charlestown had slots, Delaware had slots, New Jersey had slots, and mostly Pennsylvania. I mean, they were killing us. They were killing us.
Now, I know Rhoda Christmas Bowling had an influence and an impact on your career, and I want to ask you a little bit about her. But before we get there, when you were doing breeding, foaling, raising, breaking horses, riding a steeplechase race over a wooden fence, all of that stuff you were doing in the industry back then, did it ever enter your mind that someday you would become a racing rider, so to speak, and be writing novels?
A little bit, yeah, because I loved, I read everything that, every Black Stallion book that Walter Farley ever wrote, all of them, the Island Stallion, and I love those books. And I loved his racing scenes. They were so exciting. And then later on, of course, it was Dick Francis. And I was always good at writing. It was the one thing I was best at school, creative writing. So I knew I could write, but you know, you always think, well, everybody else is better than I am, and I won't be able to do it. You know, I wasn't good at coaching myself until a while later. But my first book, which is called Full Mortality, is dedicated to Rhoda Christmas Bowling and Alfred H. Smith as the two people that had the biggest influence in my life. And I have to tell you this, Rhoda's niece, her name is, you will not believe this, she's coming to visit me for Christmas. Her name is Kitsy Christmas, and she'll be here.
Okay.
She'll be here tomorrow. And her father trained the famous legendary Gallarette.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And Kitsy grew up.
Gallarette's one of the all-time greats. I was actually
Haskins said that. Steve Haskins said that.
You know, I was on a panel with him.
He's a great guy.
Equestricon, I think it was.
I was there.
Okay, I was on a panel with him, and it was a debate the greats, and we all, I forget who else was on the panel. I know Steve was. I was on there. 2 or 3 other people were on there, and we each picked a horse, and we debated who was the best of the best. And I remember Steve was Gallarette was the one that he was arguing the best.
She was amazing. You know, she beat champion Male Stymie. She beat him 3 times. I mean, you just don't do that. Fillies don't do that. So anyway, it's kind of fun and exciting because Kitsy, when she was a little kid, she had a pony at Delaware Park, and then her father would take her up to Saratoga every summer, and she'd take her pony up there with her. And then when she was about 5, her father died, and her whole world just turned upside down. You know, it's funny how people's lives are. They're just, well, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rhoda Christmas Bowling, how is it that she became, and why don't you tell everybody who she was and how she became?
Well, she was arguably the first, what am I trying to say? That when you write for the racing forum and the newspapers, back when the newspapers actually carried racing,
Right.
She wrote all the horse columns, and in the 40s. And how many women were writing horse racing journalism in the newspaper in the 40s?
I wasn't alive in the 40s. I'm not quite that old, but I would guess that there was probably a small number of women journalists in the entire industry.
She's the first. And she was a tough woman. And she had her own horses. She bred horses, and I'd always be on her farm when I was a kid riding her ponies. She gave a pony to Kitsy and I to ride. After Kitsy, when her father died, Rhoda became her aunt. And Kitsy and I became very best friends and have been for years. And Rhoda gave us a pony to ride one summer, and she had all the thoroughbreds there. And, you know, we would hear all about what was going on. And she and Yancey Christmas, who was a famous Christmas. I don't know if you know, the Christmases were, my mother was so shocked because she went down there one day to Old Marlboro Racetrack before it closed down, and she heard Rhoda and Yancey Christmas. And to her, Rhoda was just a fine lady. And Rhoda and Nancy were down there going, "You goddamn son of a bitch, I don't care what you say, blah, blah, blah." You know, my mother was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it."
You know, I want to ask you something a little bit off topic because you mentioned it, but it's something that comes up a lot nowadays, and you may be peripherally aware of it. You may not be if you're not involved in the game, but you know, most of the newspapers don't carry racing anymore, and we get very little mainstream coverage at all, unless it's bad.
Yes.
But racing does have some people who do write about it and do cover it. Yeah, me and a couple of others. Most of it, though, is based on the gambling side or the news. But a lot of people who are fans of the game attack the media and say they don't really act as journalists and really report what's going on behind the scenes and the stories and some of the negativity. You know, there's a lot of things that are alleged to be going on in the sport today that shouldn't be. And the media in large does stay away from a lot of it. And I understand why, but a lot of people don't. So I'm curious as to your take of journalism in horse racing today, as opposed to back then, and in the times of Rhoda and even a little bit after that, when it really might have been true journalism covering the sport as opposed to what it is today. And I don't mean to slight any of the journalists today. It's just different.
It is different, and it's not as good as it was. And well, that, you know, everything's changed. Back in the day, remember, because this is history, I wasn't alive then either, but they used to close down the Senate and the Congress because everybody would get on a train and go to Baltimore to watch the Preakness.
Right.
That's how racing was. I mean, and they loved it. And it was so important to people. And now it's just like, you know, think of it as I'm not sure how people view it, but there's so many people like the do-gooders, I can't even think of their names, the ones that, you know, they want racing to be closed down because it's cruel and mean and horrible. And we don't hear enough about the people like Jonathan Shepard, you know, who for years would give a horse a year off if he needed it. And then he'd bring him back. He did that with a horse named Just as well. Not that long ago, he brought the horse back and won $900,000 with the horse.
Right.
And that's a funny story because George Strawbridge gave him the horse because the horse couldn't run because he had soft bones. So Jonathan took him, turned out in the field for a year, and then won all the money with him.
Right.
Yeah, he won all the money.
Yeah, no, those old school guys and the stories like that don't get near the amount of attention that they deserve. And you know, one of the problems that I think that the industry has is that there's no uniformity in promoting the sport in that type of light. You know, there really isn't. There's just nothing to push out that kind of information in any kind of organized, consistent way. They just kind of leave it to whatever, and most of the times those stories don't get told, which is unfortunate for the sport.
It is unfortunate, but I will tell you, which I think is interesting, because so many of the books that are written are nonfiction books, which are great. You know, there'll be like, I thought about I should write a book about Gallarette because I have a lot of information about her. But when I won my book called Flamingo Road, which actually looked at dimorphin, you know, as a problem, and I won that wonderful, huge award, you know, $10,000 book award, the Dr. Tony Ryan Award in Kentucky. And they gave me this huge trophy that was made at, you know, from Waterford in Ireland, where all those Ryans come from. But anyway, I spoke to the group that was there that night, and I said, I really think that these nice books that you usually pick about, you know, real horses and real things that happened are wonderful books, but I said, you're kind of preaching to the choir. I said, if you have fiction books that make people's blood race, that make them excited, that make them interested, really interested and have a character that they can root for, that they care about, I think that can do more to promote racing than another book about Secretariat. I really believe that. And that's why I like to write. And I wish more people would write good horse fiction. The problem is most people who write about horse racing don't know anything about it, and it isn't any good.
I tend to agree. I think there's a lot of people that cover the sport and write about the sport that really haven't lived it and don't understand it and don't, as you do, so to speak, have it in their veins and in their, in their heart. I agree with you there. So how did the transition happen? First book, first thing you wrote, how did that all come to pass?
The first book I ever wrote is still in a drawer where it belongs, and it was kind of a romancy thing called Heart of a Winner. It's a good story, but I didn't know how to write a mystery novel. So then I took a course in writing the mystery novel, and I learned a lot of things that I had never realized, that you have to do things that are expected of a good mystery book. And then I wrote Full Mortality, and it was the first book that I'd ever written to get published, and it was nominated for both an Agatha and a Macavity Award, and you could have knocked me over with a feather for that. But it was so much fun because it's a Maryland book. Everybody in there is in Maryland, and people from Maryland love that book because they recognize the people in there.
Right.
Some of the trainers, and I can't even think now, like if the guy's name was King Leatherberry, I would have named him Leather King or something like that. So everybody knew who I was talking about. But and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And I wrote a lot about the seedy training track that had old Marlboro racetrack where, Rhoda had run all her horses, and it was a wonderful track for years, but it turned into a horrible seedy racetrack, training track. And I wrote a lot about that in that first book. I put it as my hero, my jockey, my female jockey, Nikki Luttrell. She gets ruled off the track. So she winds up at this god-awful place, and it's an interesting story about because I had a couple of horses stabled there for a while, so I know how bad it was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was awful.
How many racing novels have you written?
Let's see, I have 5 Nikki Luttrell novels. And I have 2 Fee and McKee. Those I wrote for St. Martin's Press, and they're really good. That's the one that won the award. But St. Martin's Press, the marketing and sales department decided way in advance that a horse racing novel was not going to sell. And with that attitude, guess what? They didn't sell. So they dropped me like a hot potato, and now I just self-publish. It's easier. And
Interesting.
yeah, you can write your own game.
Interesting.
It is interesting. The publishers are just, it's all about money. They don't care about anything but money. And actually, they're not in the business of charity. So
I've wanted to write a book for a long time. I wrote a little book about Ruffian that actually it's in the Keeneland Library, because I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I'm very good friends with the person that actually held her when she was euthanized and was with her the entire time after the accident. He never really spoke publicly about it, but he was always frustrated about all the stories because they just weren't true. There were so many people that said they were there and said this happened and that happened. And he always used to tell me, he would be like, John, he goes, I was there from the minute they brought her to the hospital till the time she came out of surgery, in the recovery room, till the time she was euthanized. I held her. He goes, and all these stories aren't true. And I'm like, Ray, you got to let me write about that. I mean,
you should.
It's history is wrong. We should get it right, And he's like, well, I don't want to call people out. I don't want to call people. I said, well, let me do it in a way where I won't call anybody out. And I didn't. I basically told the story the way it happened. The vet who was with him, who was her regular vet, Dr. Pendergast, was kind enough to speak to me as well. And he confirmed everything that Ray said. Those were the only 2 guys that were there. And basically, I didn't call anybody out individually, but what I said was something like, if everybody who said they were in the recovery room actually was, they would have had to let her recover in Yankee Stadium because they just weren't there. The only two people that were there were Dr. Pendergrast and Ray. And then Dr. Hill when he came in and euthanized her, and that was it. Nobody else was there, and it was in a garage-like setting with a little window that was a square window like this, and that's it. Nobody could see in. Nobody knew what was going on. So I did it in a way without really calling anybody out.
Oh, that's good.
But I've always wanted to write a book, but I always shied away from it because I was always afraid that there's just not enough interest in the sport anymore.
Well, we have to do
have any
something
commercial
about that.
value, to have any really commercial value. But I may do it someday. It's been something I've really wanted to do.
Well,
for a
you
long time.
should, life's short.
It is, and it would probably be a regret if I didn't do it. But we'll see what happens. Let's stick to your books. So, what's the most recent one that you have done?
It's the last Nikki Luttrell that I've written so far, and it's called
Right.
Shooting Star.
Right.
And this one takes place out at Santa Anita.
Okay.
And if you may recall the HBO special that just was ill-fated, to say the least, the one called Luck.
I remember it.
And horses were dying and they had to cancel it. And I think that's where PETA got involved and everybody went crazy. And I went out there and talked to the point man at Santa Anita who actually dealt with HBO. And he was so kind to me. He gave me an aerial map of where the HBO film crew was allowed to go. And they had like a small space that was cordoned off for them. And they had to enter. They couldn't go onto the backstretch at all. They had to enter right through a gravel parking lot. And he told me that the people that were filming this movie didn't know anything about horses, and they would take these horses and they would film a race or a work, and they wouldn't be pleased with it, so they do it again, and then they do it again. And you can't treat a horse like that. They were treating them like machines, so they were breaking down and dying.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is. It's terrible. So because I always bring the Thoroughbred Racing Protective Bureau into a lot of my books. One of my characters now is an agent for the TRPB, and he subcontracts Nikki. He says, I want you to come out here. I need some help. They're filming a horse movie, and we don't want it to end up like Luck. So, we want to watch out for the horses, and I want you to come out here, and I want you to just be kind of incognito. You're just going to be an exercise rider, but you're going to keep an eye out and let me know what's going on, because they'll hide things from me because I work for the TRB openly. So she does. And of course, there's a murder in the first chapter, and there's all kinds of shenanigans going on. It has nothing to do with bad horse racing. It has to do with some other crimes that are just related to filming a movie. So I learned an awful lot about movie making, and I learned a lot about, I went out to Santa Anita twice. I love that place. I was there when Zenyatta won the, oh God, well, I just sitting.
So you felt the ground shake.
Oh yeah, I felt my heart beating. She's way back there, and I'm looking at her, and she's just, it's like everybody's a parking meter. She's going by them like they're parking meters, and she's a Maserati. It was ridiculous. I've never seen anything like it. It was just incredible. So that was wonderful. And I was lucky enough to know Jonathan Shepard, and that was the same weekend that his horse Informed Decision won the Breeders' Cup filly mare sprint. And I got to be in the winner's circle for that. And that all that kind of stuff means so much to you. I mean, it's just like memories you can never ever forget.
Any dreams? And the answer is probably yes. Of one of your books becoming a movie.
I wish it could. And
how does that happen? Like, the studios have to find you? Is that something?
Yeah, somebody has to know somebody that knows somebody. And all these people on Facebook are always saying, well, why don't you have your, well, why don't you call somebody? Do you know anybody? And they always go, oh, well, I don't know anybody. And I go, well, I don't either. And that's what it is. You have to know somebody who knows somebody that's read your book and can push it to Netflix or Amazon Prime. I mean, so many people are doing movies now. And
let me tell you, there are some really, really bad movies. So you would think that Netflix. There's room to give horse racing a shot. Do you know a lot of the older horse racing movies?
Well, I mean, obviously, some of the really old things, like, the one, oh God, National Velvet, obviously.
Right,
But
obviously.
I
Well,
mean,
no,
I really
there's an
enjoyed.
obscure one I'm going to ask you about.
Oh,
Okay.
I probably won't know it.
You probably won't know it, but it's a really, really interesting movie uh, about horse racing that my dad told me about when I was a kid. Okay.
Oh,
And
I
we
better
were
write
lucky
this
enough to
down.
watch it together. It's called Wall of Noise.
Oh, boy, that says it all, doesn't it? Wall of
Yeah,
Noise. I'll look it up. I hope it's on Netflix or someplace where I can.
it's going to be almost impossible to find. Yeah, it's a 1963 film. I'm looking at it as we
That's
speak.
old, but
Okay.
you'll have to pay. I guess I'd have to pay for it, and I'm poor, so I don't pay for it.
A guy named Ty Hardin was the star, and Suzanne Plachette, who you've
Oh,
probably
she was
heard of, was in
beautiful.
it.
Yeah, she was a lovely gal.
Yeah, it's all set. I want to say around Santa Anita. Might be Hollywood Park, but it's definitely one of the two. And it's a really interesting horse racing story about a trainer with a wealthy owner and a horse, and everything that happens, and it's around there. And it's a really, really cool, somewhat authentic type of horse racing movie. That never really gets any recognition at all. I mean, when people say, "Oh, the best racing movies," everybody names the same ones. Everybody loves the one that was filmed at Hialeah, and I like it as well. Let It Ride, very
Oh yeah, I
popular,
loved Let It Ride.
funny
I
kind
mean,
of
it was
movie.
fun, and it was.
Absolutely a classic, and Hialeah is a great backdrop.
It was.
Was a great racetrack in its day. But there are some other really good ones that never get any recognition, including my personal favorite, which is definitely a movie not for everybody. Another one, it's called The Killing, and it's about a robbery at a racetrack.
I saw that.
Sterling Hayden stars in it, and it's actually Stanley Kubrick's, who was a famous director.
Oh, yeah.
It's his first film.
Really?
Yes, it's his first film, and Sterling Hayden is the star, and it's about a bunch of guys who do an inside robbery of the money room at a racetrack, and it's definitely a dark type of caper movie, and I could say it's not for everybody. There's a lot of machine gun scenes and stuff like that, but it's
As long as
really
they're not killing
really
horses with machine guns, I'm fine.
no, but actually, that you mentioned that a horse does get killed in the movie. One of the things that they do to create a diversion during a very, very big race, there's a fictitious horse named Red Lightning, and he's a speed horse. So the guy who's planning the robbery says, "Listen," he goes, "Red Lightning's going to be on the lead going into the first turn, and we're going to create a diversion. We're going to have somebody in the parking lot. He's going to shoot Red Lightning. Red Lightning will go down. Nobody will know what happened. There'll be a big commotion. Everybody will be running on the track, or what happened, and that's when we'll be simultaneously hitting money room." So it is like I said, it's not for everybody, and I'm a huge animal lover.
That wouldn't bother me that much. I'm just thinking.
But it's a story, you know what I mean? It's not
money.
real. It's not real. Because
But that stuff, I mean, I had to hold a horse that I bred that I love more than any horse I've ever owned. He was, his name was For Love and Honor. You might have even bet him when he ran in New York. He was a good allowance horse.
I do know the horse.
And he went down through the claiming ranks, and I'm not going to name any names, but there's a trainer in Maryland that got a hold of him and was running him, and then started running him in cheap claiming races in Charleston. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, God, this is just a grand old horse, and why don't you just let me have him? I'll take him home." And he was 10 years old. Okay, the horse is now 10.
Oh.
And he goes, "Well, we just gave him throat surgery, so we have to get our money back out of him." He broke down. That was it. Just, I mean, you see some of this stuff. So I've been there. I've seen it all. And I held the horse on a shank while my friend, who was a cop, came over and shot him in the forehead.
Wow.
One shot, boom, and the horse was dead before he hit the ground. And so it's the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life. Worse than when my mother died, worse than when my father died, worse than anything ever in my life. And to think that that was unnecessary. That's what makes me so mad.
Right. Yeah. No, there are some really bad things that go on in our game, unfortunately, and hopefully we're on a path to make things better and improve some. Will it ever be 100%? I don't think so. Is the commitment to do that as strong as it should be? I would argue it's not, but hopefully we're moving in the right direction.
Well, we are, because they're starting to, stop all these thousands of different jurisdictions with all their different,
Right,
drug
and
programs.
hopefully
That's very helpful.
HISA will be a very, the Horse Racing Safety Integrity Act will be a very, very big positive thing for the sport. But
Yeah, and
we'll
when
see.
I write, I don't write that negative stuff. And the bad guys always get what's coming to them. And the horses are well taken care of, and the endings are very satisfying. So I don't write the kind of stuff I was just talking to you about. And I probably shouldn't have even brought it up, but
Well,
sometimes it just comes
yeah.
out.
The passion is there, and I understand that, and I share that same passion. So it's actually probably better that we do talk about it, because awareness brings change, and it's better that people are aware that there are things going on that we don't like, and not all of us are a part of, and in support of.
Exactly.
It's important to say that. So I know you have a website, Sasscer, SSCERhill.com. Is that where people can go to purchase your books, or
It's
Amazon?
the easiest place. I mean, they can go to Barnes and Noble, Amazon, and all that. But if you go to my website, each book has a very clear, you want to buy it at Barnes and Noble, click here. You want to buy it at Amazon, click here. So, it'll take you right to it.
And nowadays, and I have to ask you, because the technology and everything now, I'm not exactly sure what a Kindle is, but I think that actually plays the book or talks the book to you or something.
Well, actually, a more expensive Kindle will do both, but Kindles are great, especially for somebody my age, because you can make the type size any size you want. You can make it really big. It's easy to read. And the Kindle itself is so lightweight. It's not like trying to hold up some big book.
I can relate to that, because when everybody started transitioning from reading past performances in the racing form on computer, I was like, I'm never going to do that. I like the form. I like the paper form. I like to write on it. Not me. Now I need it on the computer, big, light, bright,
Exactly.
everything.
I know.
I can't read it on paper anymore. So we all come around
I
one way or the other.
I know what you're saying.
we all come around. You've led quite a full, and it's not nowhere near over, but an interesting life around horse racing, which I find fascinating.
Well, I love it. I love it. And I loved horses when I was a little girl. And are we running out of time?
No, you can go on as long as you want.
Because my father wouldn't let me have a pony. I already said that. But we had some sharecroppers on the farm, and they had big Belgian plow horses.
Right.
And when I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, I would go out there when my father was there, of course, and I would get anything I'd find, with a string, a rope, a belt, anything, and I would attach it to the horse's halter, and I'd lead them into the barn where they had those tie stalls. They didn't have the box stalls, but for the workhorses, they had the tie stalls. And I would climb up the slats on the side, and I would hop on that horse's back, and I would back it up with my little string or rope and turn her around. They were all mares, and off we'd go. And I would just, in the summer, I'd be barefoot, and my little heels would be beating their side. And they're just so kind. They were so kind to me. And, I'd get them to canter, and, I thought it was just great. And I taught myself how to ride that way.
Wow.
Because he wouldn't give me a pony. So I'm out there on 2,800-pound draft horses.
Did you ever bet? Were you ever a better?
No, I bet my own horses.
Okay.
I knew, and the one time I had a horse, she was a not for love named No Better Love, as in no betting love. And we knew she wanted to go on the turf, and we put her on the turf the first time. And it was at, oh God, what am I trying to say? Colonial Downs. And it was a mob scene, and nobody knew how to bet, and nobody knew what they were doing. And I got shut out, and I couldn't bet her. and she won going away.
Oh, that's a typical story.
Yeah.
That's shut out and they win going away.
Yeah,
If you made it, she might not have won. It just goes that way.
I know.
It's
You
one of
never
those
know.
little nuances of the game that none of us can quite explain.
Yeah, but we knew she wanted to run on the turf. I mean, what was in her pedigree, I can't even think of the horse, but he was a turf horse on the bottom side, and just it's frustrating.
Yeah. You still watch the big races at least?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I just got a smart TV,
Right.
and it has a lot of channels on it that I couldn't watch before, and some of them are really inexpensive, like $5 a month subscription. So now I can
Right.
watch horse racing again, all of NBC, because they have all those great races, the Breeders' Cup races,
Yeah.
win and you're in,
Absolutely.
and
Uh-huh. Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I still love it, but it's kind of bittersweet because you're not in the stands watching your horse, and I used to follow the breeding so closely because I was breeding, and I used to know, I could tell you every single stallion, and just rehearse his family line and all that stuff. And I think you said you were like that when you were young.
I was.
And now I don't, I don't know that much about it anymore. When I came along, it was Northern Dancer, Mr. Prospector. You crossed those two and you couldn't go wrong. And I
Right.
had a lot of that when I was racing.
All right. Any involvement at all? Any ownership involvement at all now or no?
No. When the market crashed in 2008, we pretty much lost everything. Because
sorry.
that was the same year that the horse market crashed in Maryland, because they couldn't get slots. And I went to a timonium sale and had a nice horse, no bid, because he was a Maryland bred. Nobody wanted. I mean, even came into my the agent's area where the horses were, and they said, I don't even want to look at a Maryland bred. I want Pennsylvania breds, and ones that would have the bonuses.
Right.
So there were people who would go to get their trailer or truck and take it home, and they would find a yearling had been stuck on their trailer because somebody was praying that person would at least give the horse a home or do something with it. I mean, it was that bad. It was that bad. And so that, and then the stock market crash where my money was. So it was a tough year.
I'm sure it was.
Tough.
It was a lot of people.
A lot of people, exactly. I was not
well,
alone.
You're resilient. You're bouncing back, which is great.
Doing my best.
And I'm going to read your books. I haven't had a chance yet, but now that I'm aware of them and that we've met, I can't wait to get into.
You should give one a try. You'll probably like it.
I will do it for sure.
As they say, give it a ride.
I will do it for sure. Sasscer, thank you so much for joining us. It was
so
really,
welcome.
really a pleasure to meet you again. It's Sasscer Hill, Sasscer Hill, SASSCERHILL.com is her website. You can read more about her there. You can find her books there. And it was absolutely a pleasure to meet and introduce you to some of the Past the Wire viewers.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. You're a great guy to talk to. Really fun.
Oh, thank you. That's kind of you to say. I'll stop the show now, and then we can say goodbye.
Okay.
Off camera.
Okay.
Nobody does it better.